Hello, Jen.
I'm not ready.
Nobody here.
No one here. Hello, Jen.
Hi.
How are you? There you go, one more base.
We good?
You ready? I know. Being
All right, we're
soft-spoken
gonna get
here.
started. We're gonna start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. The rain is giving us a temporary break, so that's nice. We are going to start by reviewing and signing the payroll and accounts payable. For this accounting period, we had payroll in the amount of $40,408.66, and we had accounts payable in the amount of $14,518.26. Can we have quiet, please? Excuse me, can we have quiet, please? Thank you. Overtime, police department 5 hours, fire department 12 hours, highway 0, and we had no ACH payments. And while they're signing that, just a reminder to everybody that anybody that hasn't registered their dog already, your time is up. It's time to do it now unless you want a visit from a police officer at your house. There's been postings and it was on Facebook, so now's your moment if you have forgotten to do it.
Karen's going to do it now.
Shoot, I forgot.
Daffy's here till 7.
Thank you. We all set? Everybody signed the rec manifest?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
you.
You too.
Bye-bye. Who's got the consent agenda? Does somebody have it in their hot little hands? I think that's it.
On your left.
Right down at the end.
Oh.
If everyone's had a chance to review the consent agenda, I'll take a motion to approve.
So,
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so that passes. Our consent agenda this week contains the rec manifest, the treasurer's report, and the building permits. There you go. We will now open it up for public comment. As we've done in the past, we'll ask people to either come up or sit in this chair so that they can use this microphone down at the end so that people on video can hear what you have to say. All right, Lois, it looks like you're inviting yourself up.
I
Come
made
on
myself
up.
first. I made myself first. I'm sorry.
Come on up.
Okay. My question is regarding the library on the agenda tonight. What is the reason for being on the agenda?
Sure. We'll talk about that a little bit more when they're up here, but as you remember, there was a vote at town meeting that was tabled for funding the library. We then had a discussion at this board to free up some ARPA funds and had a discussion that we had a willingness to use some amount of that ARPA to help the library potentially in a staged fashion. So this is the next step of that process for the library trustees coming back to us with where they are in that process of moving forward to figure out a staged bidding situation so that we will have a number in the future to vote on for our appropriate.
So it's just an update and
It's an
everything?
update.
And then you're not going to do any active action tonight?
There is nothing that is up for action at this point, is my understanding.
Madam Chair, can we just note that we have a serious safety and liability
Absolutely.
issue at the library?
Yeah, I think
that
this
it's
board has been pretty clear.
Incumbent upon us to
Absolutely.
seek to.
It is a status update.
Okay. That's what I needed. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'll tell you, your minutes, this thing getting ahead of time is wonderful. Thank you again for that.
Good, I'm glad you're enjoying that. Liz, come on up.
So I have 3 things. 2 are on the library. Is this proposal anything different? Is it new or is it the same proposal?
I believe it is an update of the proposal that they've been working on that I don't think is changed from a few months back. What's different is they're gonna give us an update on what comes next in terms of moving forward.
Okay. And the money is coming from ARPA?
The money is not decided at this point. We need to have an actual bidded dollar value before we could make any decisions about money.
Okay.
There's no money given to this project at this point from the town.
Okay, and then I have a question about the earned time proposal. So it doesn't make sense to me when we have overtime every week from most of our, like, police, fire, I think you said police was 5, that we have people taking time off when we don't even have people that are able to fill in the time that we
Earned
need.
time is about a benefit structure that we will be discussing tonight.
Yeah, it's about getting time off, but if you don't have.
Correct.
So if you give some people more time off and you already don't have enough people doing the regular hours,
We're gonna
then you have
discuss
more
that.
overtime.
We're going to discuss that with the chief tonight. It's part of the benefits package. Thank you for your comments. Other public comment? Hi.
Jim Hasher, Mohawk Lane. Just wanted to say about the library, I know it's on the agenda, and I read the full packet. Thank you again for providing all the information. And as it was discussed, as Mr. Morgan brought up, it is a safety hazard, and one of the things that was discussed when the letter, I don't know if the letter was written to the trustees or not, but there was I think Mr. Kleiman even said, like, hey, yeah, there's a safety hazard there, and let's see a phased approach. How much would it cost just to fix the safety hazard? I read this, I don't see that in there. I still see the full-blown, do everything. And there also, what is not in there is that there was a survey done. And I mean, I went to 2 of the meetings and filled out the surveys with a lot of other people, and the survey responses were online. I can't find them anymore, but I know one of the top things that came out of the survey that they will tell you is that cost was a concern. And this looked like it was roughly $400-something thousand, and it doesn't even address the fact that we can't use the first floor to the second floor. And it's like, it seems like instead of just focusing on fixing the problem, and then if you want to expand parking and do all kinds of paving, that's very expensive, okay, how much would that cost in phases, things like that. I just didn't see that in this presentation. So, again, back to, I thought this was a request looking at, could we use opera money to quickly get that eyesore and safety hazard fixed, and I just don't see it in this presentation.
Thank you for your comments. As I said to Lois, my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, and they'll talk about that during their presentation, is that right now there's a conceptual plan with some estimated costs.
Right.
We do not yet have any contractors who have offered any bids for a staged approach.
Right.
So that is what they're here to talk about us tonight, is moving forward with that. We can't make a decision on estimated costs. We can only make a decision if we have an actual contract proposal in front of us.
Right.
So that is the process to move ahead, and we have had discussions with the library about how can we do this in a staged, economical way. In terms of the community survey, I defer that to the trustees
Sure.
who
And-
analyzed that.
And I
data.
agree, some of this discussion should be at the trustees
Sure.
meeting. I was at the May trustees meeting, and I know there was at least a 30-minute or so discussion on like a follow-up, or, let's look at, why didn't the thing pass? And I'm hoping there will be a follow-up meeting with public for that. I haven't seen that announced yet, but that's something we can share with the trustees.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other public comment?
Do we have to say our name?
Yes, please.
Okay. Becky Dunham, Block Drive. I wanted to first thank you for putting out the packet, because it was very helpful to read in depth how far the project is along, and to see at last what the cost might be, because there's been a lot of concern about the cost. As Jim mentioned, one of the overriding concerns in the survey was the cost. And there was some back and forth earlier on in the year, that figures that were thrown around were lies, but it seems proving true that these are the costs that this project's going to be. I have a couple of specific questions. Does the elevator cost be included in that 415, or is that an additional fund, additional request, because that's in the capital improvement plan for 2024, a $150,000, it says elevator. So is this part of it, or is this in addition to the 415? Also, there's a goal by the library trustees to raise money independently through GoFundMe and grants for $50,000. Is that in addition to the 415, or is that included in the 415? these kinds of details.
Sure. We'll defer those questions to their presentation and have them answer those.
I would also like to see more information shared with the community on an ongoing basis and for them to welcome input from the community in a public forum. This project is much more detailed than was presented as far as figures go in March, so people are going to be curious about this. And I think more information, more transparency would be very helpful to the project. There
That's
hasn't been.
actually why we have them here tonight.
I hope so, and I hope you'll have another session where there's a public forum for anyone who is interested on a convenient night to learn a little bit more.
I'll defer that to the trustees if they
I
feel
think that
that's
would be a wise
what they'd like
decision.
to do.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments? All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment and move on. I don't know if Rick is here.
Yep, me too.
Yes, oh, hiding in the back. Come on up, we have you first on our discussion action items. Rick is our chair of our energy committee and here to give us kind of an update, status update for what's
Sure.
been going on that committee.
Thank you, Rick LeBrec from VZ Circle, and thanks for having me. Yeah, I'll just give a quick update on two of the major things that we have on our plate right now. The most important and the one we spend the most time on is researching community power as an option for the town. We're monitoring what's going on with the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, which you may have heard of. There's now upwards of 32 towns, I believe, have joined that coalition. They recently launched the first group of towns within the last month or two. And I think the rate is like 15.4 cents, but it's for a fairly short window of time. I think they're trying to track when Eversource changes their rates, which would be August 1st, to adjust their pricing. We've also had a presentation from representatives from Standard Power, who is an energy service provider that is also in the community power space. They're serving Keene, Swansea, Jaffrey, and I believe they just signed up Derry as a prospective new client. Our May meeting, we had another group, Colonial Power Group, who's kind of affiliated with Freedom Energy, which is a New Hampshire-based energy service provider. They're also getting involved in community power. Colonial Power serves dozens of towns in Massachusetts. Massachusetts' version of community power is a little bit different, but they're getting into New Hampshire now. I believe their only firm customer is Hampton, but they've got a few more that they're in communication with. So we anticipate our next meeting for the Energy Committee is June 21. We're going to go through, what we've learned so far and perhaps come up with a recommendation to bring to this board shortly thereafter on, I guess, to put it bluntly, which of the three options to continue to pursue with the goal of then refining our plan, bringing it to the town, conducting there's at least 2 town meetings required by statute. You can also, Standard Power also sends out a survey to town members to kind of gauge their interest in types of things they're interested in. But so there's a lot of work to do once we kind of focus on which of the 3 entities we want to collaborate with the most. All in the effort of getting ready for, I guess, the town meeting next year.
So I'm assuming that what's underneath what you're saying is that your committee is generally in favor of putting community power in front of the voters. The question is really just what type of vendor we might want to use. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yeah, I think there's generally at least a majority consensus to keep going with the research and bring it to the town, discuss it with, community members, and bring a plan to the town meeting. And, we think there's a lot of benefit to it. And, last winter was a real volatile time, right? And when prices spike, people start scrambling for what the heck can we do? And that led to a lot of growth in the community power service offerings in New Hampshire. Now, has that pricing emergency gone away? We're expecting it to be a little bit dampened maybe for the rest of the year, but the winter periods are still a significant, opportunity for price volatility, and for customers or community members that don't have the time or aren't inclined to keep their eye on it. You can get put through the paces of periods of very high rates, and one of the benefits of community power is that you have an organization planning a portfolio and trying to mitigate these types of price spikes by managing the power supply on behalf of the town. And it's worked very successfully in many communities. And but similarly, the committee was also in favor of more research. We got together in the fall and did, dug into the topic and did a lot of research there too, but realized there's no way we could give it the treatment it deserved in time for this past March. So yeah, that's the update there, unless you've got any
Can I ask a
other
follow-up
questions.
question? So the way the energy plan that goes before the voters looks, sounds like it will be impacted by which potential vendor the town decides to use. My understanding though is that it doesn't necessarily, like your energy plan that goes before the voters doesn't have to be tied to a
Right.
vendor, correct? So if we pick like one of the private vendors versus CPCNH, would the energy plan look significantly different? Or would it just, we could shift at any point to different vendors?
Yep, we started with the CPCNH template,
Right.
which was like 56 pages and, very, very detailed, to the point where even the committee members giving it some serious research were a little bit maybe blown away by the terms and conditions. We've trimmed it down significantly. We've made it generic, so there's nothing in there that is specific to the way CPCNH runs their programs. And so we'll be able to adopt that plan, that draft plan, to whatever vendor we decide to focus on.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And Paul, I know that you were not on the board when we had a lot of these discussions. Do you understand kind of the basics of what we're talking about here? Yeah? Okay. I just wanted to make sure you weren't like totally confused by what we were talking about.
I get confused a lot, but no, I think I'm okay.
Okay, perfect.
All right, the other thing I was going to mention is the fire station solar facility, right, which is coming to the end of year 6. And there's an option in the power purchase agreement for the town to exercise an option to purchase and take ownership. And so we would no longer be buying the power at a contracted rate. We would own it, so we would get the power for 0. But in exchange for that, you you have to fork over the purchase price, and then you have to take on ownership responsibility. So there's some level of analysis, you know, we're just starting to look into it now. I had a chat with Rob Wolfchuk, who was instrumental in bringing it online 6 years ago, and he was very helpful in grounding me on the PPA structure. But it is an economic analysis. It is a big decision. O&M responsibilities on that machine is not, you know, it isn't effortless. So there's not only, you have to hire an O&M provider. You also have to deal with you know, breakages and things that come up. You know, so you have preventive maintenance and corrective maintenance. So that's an issue that needs to be researched a little bit. Whether the insurance for the building and the property needs to be modified at all, I know nothing about that, but we're going to have to dig into that. We would take on salvage and disposal obligations, but potentially the annual savings would be significantly greater. We've been tracking it since inception, and it's been in the $6,000 to $9,000 net benefit to the town energy budget under the PPA. So, you know, given the remaining life of the PPA, if energy prices are going to continue to be fairly high relative to the past 10 years, the value of that PPA will still be significant, you know, and will most likely grow over time. So the do-nothing case, you're going to have that stream of savings continue. If you exercise the option, the savings will be greater, but you've put that money to use. So you know you no longer have it. So that's a financial cash flow analysis that needs to be done.
And I know
Yeah.
when Revision came and spoke to us last summer, and I believe our option is up like in August of this year. I think that's the first time we could potentially do a buyout. They seem to think, and of course they may not have been thinking about some of these things like insurance and everything. They really did a presentation for us that they thought it was extremely in our financial best interest to buy out the PPA. And so what I'm hearing from you is like, oh, like, wait a minute, let's make sure all the nuts and bolts are there. They also talked about the rec credits and that we could sell those, and that was additional financial input. So is your committee comfortable kind of getting into all the nitty-gritty of that and coming back to us in the next couple of months?
Yes.
Because I will admit, like last summer when we had that conversation, like I think all of us were just there's so many terms being thrown around that I think it's a little hard to grasp exactly all the ins and outs.
Absolutely. And like any entity, you know, they have, you know, their own interest in mind, and so their analyses may paint a rosier picture than a more conservative analysis. So yeah, I just think you have to be critical of and dig into it. But yeah.
And I'm assuming that your committee is aware that the town has already raised and appropriated all of the funds, at least from what they told us last year, that would be required for the buyout.
Yeah. I'm aware just based on that chat with Rob, and this hasn't come really to the committee yet. You know,
okay.
It's just basically me at this point. The committee hasn't had it as an agenda item. It was just something that was, you know, brought to my attention that it was up for this option, and so it was requested that we dig into it a bit more.
Yeah, I think we could certainly benefit from the expertise of your committee for some of those unforeseen pros or cons that might not be super obvious on first glance.
And it's also an annual option, so to the extent we read the tea leaves and think it's kind of a break even, maybe not a real compelling story either way, you can wait a year and then exercise the option at the end of year 7 or year 8. So that's another thing to think about.
Any board member questions or comments on that?
Yo, go ahead, Paul.
Regarding the community power, which it sounds like that's, something that you're considering to put up ultimately at
Yep.
town meeting. 2 questions. So one is that something that's going to be mandated, or will I have the option as a resident to opt out if I
Yep.
didn't want to be part of it? And 2, what are the factors that you're using to make the determinations between the various entities that you're considering?
Yep. Okay, your first question, the way it works is 30 days prior to launch, they call it, every town member, resident, gets some kind of letter in the mail saying, this is launching on whatever, June 1st. If you're not interested, call this number and we'll take you off the list, or the provider will take you off the list. So it's called an opt-out program. You have to call to opt out. If you don't read the mail, you weren't aware of what's going on, and you're taken by surprise, you will get put on into the program unless you're already with a supplier. If you're already the type of customer that routinely picks a retail energy service provider, and you're with a supplier at the time these mailings go out, I don't even think you get a mailing. You just stay with your supplier, right? But if you're on either
On the default, right?
if you're on the default from whatever, I think there's 3 utilities in Brentwood. If you're on their default power supply, you will get the letter. If you don't call, you will be enrolled in the program. Once you discover that you've been put in a program and you don't want to be in it, you can call and get out of it. So that's the way it works.
Okay.
Yeah. And your other question, well, we're just going to have we've heard presentations. We've been researching the 3 different companies. They've all got pros and cons, and I'm going to let the committee members hash it out and see what elements of each business appeal to them, and really see what they think.
I mean, is it just a cost-based thing, or are there other factors that you're looking at?
No, there's other factors, like CPC&H. You're part of a coalition, all right? You're part of multi-town coalition, whose in their charter and their mission is somewhat more intense or progressive than Just Price, and so there's some element there where you might think about local control, like are we being member of some kind of beast of an entity, and we're a small piece of it, whereas the other 2 providers, everything they do is town by town, right? So it's Brentwood Community Power is its own product. It's not part of a coalition, and Standard Power, they had some pretty attractive customer service features that I think struck a tone with some of the members. Colonial Power is doing it for like 80 towns in Massachusetts, and for the last 5 years, so that may be a big factor for some members. I don't think really you can go wrong either way. I think all three of them are set up to do good things for the communities they're working with. So I think we'd be fine with either, but we need to debate it and come to a recommendation.
I guess just to tag on to that, you know, we talked about it, we've talked about it a few times going back to when the committee was established. And Rick has alluded to the multiple town meetings that will need to occur. But just, I guess, a word of caution is just that we're very fortunate, as I've said before, to have Rick in the position he's in, and the entire committee, frankly, to sit there and listen to them in the Q&A with these after these presentations are made. It's really impressive, the knowledge level of the people we have on this energy committee. And so I know that they're taking a very thoughtful approach, really scrutinizing every aspect of it. And frankly, if you follow community power, if you follow the solar stuff, if you follow energy in general, you realize one thing: even people in the energy field are sometimes a little overwhelmed by the complexity of all this stuff. I can't stress that enough. And so, you know, I think one thing that occurs to me as we sit here, June, so we have a June meeting, of course, that committee meets monthly. So, you know, with the time that they have left prior to August, for instance, with the solar decision, maybe it makes sense to give some direction before Rick leaves in terms of prioritization. Because yeah, if we want an opinion on, and again, thanks to you and the committee for raising that, the solar issue, the PPA. But if we want them to focus on that as a top priority so that we can get through this decision coming up, to the extent they can keep the thing, you know, momentum going and all that. So I just want to throw that out there to the members of the committee and to Rick. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but I realize that you only have so much time with these folks. This is a volunteer committee and so forth. So
That was partly my question about the energy plan in itself versus picking a vendor. They're actually separate steps. And so, you know, my understanding is the prioritization has to be on crafting an energy plan and putting that before the voters and explaining and selling it to the voters before March.
Yep.
And even when that energy plan goes in front of the voters, we don't have to have a vendor selected at that time.
No.
That's sort of after the fact. It's the first prerequisite before you could even think about finding a vendor, right?
Yep,
So I'm
absolutely.
assuming that's how your committee is thinking about it, that
Yep.
the prioritization is getting a written plan that can be explained to the voters before
Yep.
warrants have to be put in on February, whatever, of 2024.
Yeah, and right, so when I mentioned selecting a vendor, we're not selecting anything, that's for you all to deal with, you know. But from our point of view, we've done a lot of the groundwork to build a template plan that will work. But by picking a vendor just means we'll get more one-on-one assistance from them in refining the plan, developing a package of information to bring to these town meetings, and developing the relationship.
I see.
That's not to say if it gets through town vote, then this vendor that we're working with has to come, I believe, to the select board and say, are you ready to go forward with this plan, and here's the price, and here's the date we want to start, you can read that and say, no, thank you, and then you can call up one of these other vendors and have them come in with a competing plan. So, yeah, we're not selecting anything this summer.
Right, but that makes sense. It's sort of guiding you directionally if you have sort of
Yeah.
a preference on your committee.
Yep.
In terms of the solar question, do you feel like for sort of time period that in the next few months, your committee might be able to give us a little more guidance on whether we should move forward in like an August buyout, or is that too narrow a time for
No,
your committee?
no, that's gonna be fine.
Okay.
That, yeah. You know, there'll be some things that it's not effortless, you know, we'll look at the financial analysis, which is, you know, some of the things will be fuzzy, you know, estimates of the future,
Right.
right? But you gotta lock in some kind of mathematics to make a decision.
Right.
But things like insurance and O&M, you know, those are things that are gonna need to be given some real thought, you know, it's like if the town is building a new building, it's not just the $1 million to build it, it's now you own the thing and you've gotta deal with everything about it.
Yep.
So, you know, those things are gonna become important to talk
Okay.
about too.
So it sounds like timeline-wise, you should be able in the next couple of months to come back to us about the solar at the fire station.
Yep.
And then do you guys on your committee have sort of a deadline for yourselves of when you might start advertising the community education sessions about community power?
Probably, you know, September
Okay.
or something,
Okay.
maybe, yeah,
To give enough time well before
yeah,
town meeting?
right,
Great.
right.
Okay.
And we want the plan to be tweaked by whatever we hear at those town meetings. If the discussions go a particular way, you want to incorporate that into the plan.
Great,
Yeah.
great. Thank you so much for all your work. I really
Yeah.
echo what Russ said about us being so lucky to have people with this expertise. And not to embarrass you, but I'm the board rep to Swayze, and they love to sing your praises and are so thankful for your help in terms of them just being in the infancy of thinking
Yeah.
about maybe trying to do solar someday at the school.
Yeah.
They have found you to just be an invaluable resource, and
Well,
when
thank
you're
you.
not present, they say very nice things about you, so I wanted to make sure you knew that.
Thank you. All right, all right.
Quick question, so what is the buyout in the lease? Just so we know what that amount is.
The
If you know
buyout, the
Karen knows
buyout,
that, I think.
yeah,
It's about $106,000.
I'm sorry,
106.
106?
That's what we've already appropriated.
Thanks
Thank
again.
you
All right.
so much,
Appreciate
really
it.
appreciate it. All right,
102.
102?
102.
102. Next up, we have a public hearing to accept unanticipated revenue for the New Hampshire Highway Safety Grant. Karen, I don't know if you want to provide any information about that?
So that is a highway safety grant that was awarded to the PD originally for $8,200 for directed patrols on Route 125. In addition, they were awarded another
21.
$28.50, and that is to be used for a LiDAR unit to be placed inside of the new cruiser. So because the total grant award is over and above the $10,000, the board just needs to open a hearing and to officially accept the funds.
So the amount we are accepting went from 8,200 to 10,337.50.
That's correct.
And that was due to us doing an additional application, which was granted, correct? Okay. So we'll open the public hearing. If anyone from the public has questions or comments about us accepting this grant for $10,337.50, please come forward. I don't see anybody saying no to money from a grant. So I'm going to close the public hearing. Do we need to take a vote or just, I'll take a motion to accept that grant?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so that passes. And thank you for, I think it was Justin Doty who was pretty instrumental in getting that number up, right? So thank you to him.
Nice work.
Next, we have our library presentation. I think Jeff Highland and Liz, are you guys gonna come up for that? And Janice? And I don't know, Liz, maybe on behalf of the trustees, if you might wanna, I know there was a bunch of questions from the public, if you might wanna kinda like set the scene about the intentionality of tonight in terms of, as I've already said, sort of an update, but sort of how the trustees are thinking about tonight's presentation.
Sure.
You can come sit right up here if you want.
So, yes, there is a process for, things echoing like crazy. There is a process for getting this amphitheater to the end goal that we have of building it. And when we have done a lot of the public survey, the public meetings about it, to look at what that design is and what Jeff is working us through. Jeff works with municipalities on a regular basis for these kinds of projects. And so we need to be able to finalize our plans and that they're engineered properly enough to be able to go out to bid. And that's where we are now at this point, where we want to make sure that the engineering firm, the people that had originally done the drainage and the septic system for the amphitheater that's there now, Emmanuel Engineering, they're an engineering firm, and they will let us know what the technical aspects of it. You know, if a wall is a certain height, then it has to have certain structures that make it safe and those kinds of things. So that's so they're working on the engineering parts of that right now, so that when it goes out to bid, we will take it to bid to 3 organizations, 3 probably landscape architecture firms, so that they can tell us what in fact what it will take, the final money, the final numbers for it. Those things will be bids. In terms of when people talked about looking at the price of it, I guess we're kind of done with all of that talk about what the price is really going to be and guessing from other people. One of the things that we had thought needed to happen was we didn't want to put all of the final numbers out or all of these proposed numbers out right away, because then if you go out to bid for it and you say that, you know, we're approving $374,000 worth of work, then somebody's going to say, okay, I don't have to bid it any lower than that because that's the money that they have. So that's why we haven't been like out there trumpeting the number around. But, you know, the fact that people sent out numbers that were higher than that were discouraging for us. You know, we had people posting stuff about $500,000 to $1 million on the project, and that just wasn't true. So anyway, so now we're at this point, and so hopefully we can move forward. We also, with those numbers that we looked at on that plan, we did have Kip Kaiser, who is our what is Kip? Building inspector, thank you. So he looks at those projects all the time. So when he looked at what Jeff had put together for preliminary costs, he was like, yep, that's in line with what I see for regular building. Also, there's a contingency fund in that plan for 10%, is that what it is, Jeff?
I believe that's what.
Yeah, yeah,
Like wiggle room?
wiggle room
Okay.
for that, so.
And can you explain to the public, because I know there's a lot of questions about when the project was tabled at town meeting, we came back and said, you know, the board is concerned about the safety and we are potentially looking
Right.
to use some degree of ARPA money, the dollar value TBD.
Right.
How did that change this process that you guys are doing in terms of turning it from a standalone project to a potential multi-year phased project? I think there's a lot of questions about that.
Right, so we're doing a couple of things in that regard. So we are doing fundraising campaigns because we had asked the town for $200,000. That money was tabled. We are doing fundraising projects. We have also from the library, which would have to be approved by the board, we have impact fees that we hope to use on that. We have some other funds from other sources at the library that we have people that have donated to the library for, so we have some of those funds. We also have so we have the fundraising, we have the GoFundMe fundraising program. We also have a program where we're, during
summer reading program, we will have a raffle as well. We have a donation of a week's trip to, or a week's stay at, in Orlando, that we will have people buy raffle tickets for. So there'll be 3 prizes for that. There'll be the Orlando trip. It'll take place during school vacation week in 2024. We'll have a second prize, which we're calling a Taste of Brentwood, which will be local restaurants that we have contacted to ask for donations. So far, I can't find the paper that I started with this on. So far, we have, and then we have, the last thing is called a Taste of Brentwood. No, Taste of Brentwood is the restaurants, and the last thing is called Grown in Brentwood. So for the raffle, we have, so far we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 organizations that we have contacted. 5 of them have said yes, that they will donate to it. 2 of them we're still working on. The Grown in Brentwood, we have 4, either farms or a greenhouse in Brentwood that has said yes to donating to that as well. So right now for the GoFundMe, we have $4,490 in that account. That's only people that have donated online. We also have,
We have approximately, I would say at this point, probably about $2,000 in checks, plus the Friends have also allocated some money, $2,500 towards the project.
right.
And we've been talking with donors as well.
Yeah, so we have, for that GoFundMe, I've been pounding the pavement on Route 125. As I said to the chief, I can't get over that in such a short amount of time, they raised 20 grand for the dog, to feed the dog and house the dog. And people like pets better than they like people, apparently, or me, I'm not sure which. But,
So is the thought that depending how successful your fundraising is, that will significantly impact how you will think about doing the phasing?
Exactly.
So we had looked at, when the money wasn't allocated, having to look at a more of a phased plan,
Right.
or working on, as I know someone had mentioned, sort of a fix, right, to get us past the danger point. I think what it is that we are close enough in our fundraising, or at least in anticipated funds, to the amount that we need to warrant us looking at least getting a significant portion of this project done.
Oh, okay.
There may be some things, some add alternates that have to be, that will have to be added at a later date, but it looks like we should be able to go forward with the base plan.
So will you have a sense of how much funds you have available before you even come to the town, before you go out to bid, so that you'll be able to sort of let the bidders know, are we doing this over 3 years? Are we doing it over 2 years? Do you get the sense that the timing is gonna work out that way?
well, I think with Jeff, when he looks at the plan and he talks about what they call add alternates. So that is how we're approaching it. And the thing that, to me, and Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, the thing that is the biggest add alternate, which can be done later on, is the idea that we were planning to redo the driveway and parking area. So that has to come last anyways, because you're not going to do that and then bring in big trucks to to do demolition. So that's a
So that's kind of
later.
a natural phase.
Right, that's a natural phase as well, but we hope to, between the fundraising and potential ARPA funds and what we have now, and we have a generous donor in town who is looking to contribute in the range of 6 figures to this project. And so we're pretty certain, and we also have a person in town who is the executive director for a nonprofit, or no, not a nonprofit, a foundation, and so we will be applying for a $75,000 grant for that as well.
And then we have assorted other grants, and we have somebody doing that grant writing with us. So as a team, we've been going forward aggressively to get that going.
Great.
So there's a lot going on, and there's another potential donor that we're also waiting on. So there are people that want to see this done, and we are doing everything we can to make that happen. So it's part of why we can't give hard and fast answers right now, but we definitely can project that we should be able to move forward with a significant portion of this project beyond just doing a temporary fix.
Okay.
I know that's what people wanted to see, but in our estimation, if we can get the money together, why do a temporary fix that's gonna have to be ripped out and all those costs lost if we can do it the first time?
Right.
So that is our hope and our plan, and it looks to be very,
Right, it is
and
really,
we talked to the donor that is looking to give us a significant portion today, and he's even willing to share his name. It's a matter of getting a contract put together at this point.
right, we just want to make sure we have all of our,
Do you have
T's crossed.
a basic time frame when you might be able to share with either this board or the community what kind of funds you have raised on your own outside of ARPA?
Yeah, so I think as soon as we get that documentation from his lawyer, and
Right.
then a
And
couple
then
of
the
other
grants,
smaller
too.
pieces kind of fall into place.
Okay.
Right.
One of the grantees is a patron of ours, actually, and so we're pretty hopeful. He was planning to what he said, make a significant donation or something like that. A meaningful donation, that's what he said. He wants to make a meaningful donation. Then I asked him about his foundation, and he said, yeah, go through that, but we're definitely looking to do something,
Wow,
so.
that's
I know,
great.
so it really is, it's heartwarming to think
heartwarming.
that people are stepping up. They know that it was a tough meeting for the town meeting. People just weren't interested in, the whole, taxes thing. So for people to step up and be generous that way, I think has been really helpful to us. The idea that they are really happy with the design and what we have planned and all the work that we're put into it is also, I think, a
Great.
really positive thing.
Okay,
And
so you'll keep us posted on
Yeah.
kind of how that
Yeah.
all is going.
Two other quick things, the donor, the significant donor is looking to do this as quickly as possible as well. He doesn't want this being held up too long, so that's one of the pieces. But also, one of the other things I heard in the audience was people are concerned about the elevator. So to answer that question, again, and as I've said, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 times now, we are not looking to do the elevator right now. But with the grant writers that we have, we know that there are grants out there for accessibility, and that it should not be difficult for us to be able to get a grant in the future, especially once we have this beautiful space in place, and we can say, look at what we've done. Our next step is to make it accessible to everybody, and we should be able to get the money for that. If we had to go to the town for a little bit of it, I can't even imagine that's going to be the case, because there is money out there for accessibility. So for right now, it's tabled, it's not part of this, we're not discussing it, but going forward, we will definitely be looking at that. It's just a matter of a different kind of pool of money. We're trying to save the town, not have to, raise taxes, but still get the community what they need.
Thank you.
And I'll just add to that, that nothing that's being proposed precludes the elevator from happening in the future. So there's
Gotcha.
nothing in the way, nothing has to be demoed or anything like that.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Do any board members have questions for these two before we turn over to the presentation?
Yeah, so, I thought that the direction was that we were gonna be looking at a fix of the hazard that's out there. So I haven't heard, that as something that was looked at, or something that was, I still don't have an idea as to what the number is to fix the hazard that's presently out there, whether it be temporary, interim, or otherwise.
We did look at it as part of all this, because we did hear that. It's hard to really determine that We estimated probably $60,000 to stabilize. We'd have to do some drainage fixes. You'd have to do some demo. Obviously, you have to demo the walls. You'd have to demo the concrete. You'd have to put some temporary, like a plunge pool around the catch basin. And not, because you want to make sure that the basement level does not flood. And then obviously restabilize the slopes, probably doing some planting, could be seeded. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's a significant expenditure just to kind of stabilize it, but you haven't actually made an improvement. And that's where the trustees were really struggling with that, because
How was that estimate determined?
you know, it's from our kind of background, the work that we do. We did a quick cost estimate on the cost of riprap, the cost of excavation, the cost of demo and material disposal and things like that.
I mean, do you have that documentation, that estimate for us
Again,
to?
yep. It was kind of, you know, it was just done quickly in Excel, but yes, we have something.
I think what I was hearing you say, and forgive me if I misunderstood, is that you're feeling like with some donors stepping up, you will have enough money to actually build something that's more than just a demo stabilization.
Exactly.
Maybe it's not your beautiful picture with all the lights and the trees and everything, but it's at least enough that you would bypass a demo stabilization and go to actually like a prelim build. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Which over time really does.
And if
save
that
money.
money does not materialize, we may have to go back to the idea of a stabilization plan.
Right, and if you look at the documents that Jeff had given us, we're talking about getting the engineering work done through the month of June, and then June and July, and then going out to bid, and then starting construction in October and November. So that's not that far. Right now, I mean, we've been living with it with the, you know, orange taper on it for a long time. So if people have the patience to wait for another few months, then we could get the real thing done.
Gotcha.
And that's what we hope. And again, the worst thing for my mind, the worst thing that happens is the driveway part has to get done later. But to make it the amphitheater that we, you know, that we hope for, we could start.
So all of this really hinges on what kind of fundraising you can do, plus grants, plus whatever interim difference you would ask for us from ARPA.
Exactly.
If that total amount equaled out at least a partial semi-build, that's what
Exactly.
you would prefer to do, rather than like a stabilization.
Exactly.
Okay, I think
Yeah,
I,
one of the challenges
Can you
with
provide, Jeff,
stabilization.
can you provide that estimate when you?
Sure, yeah.
I'd appreciate that, thank you.
One of the challenges with the kind of a minimalist approach is you potentially use your accessibility to the basement, because currently it's being, you know, accessed through that sidewalk that kind of goes straight down to the front doors. As part of the kind of minimal approach, we would probably want to remove that because you're removing all the retaining walls. So then you kind of lose your ADA accessibility.
you mean if you did like the demo stabilization version, you
Right.
potentially, it would exclude your use of the basement until you moved forward?
Well, you would lose your ADA
Oh,
accessibility
okay.
to the basement.
Gotcha.
You could still walk across the lawn and, you know, walk down the slope,
I see.
but it wouldn't be a truly accessible approach.
I just want to take a moment to say thank you to you both and to the trustees for having the courage to bear through this long and arduous process, and everything that was involved with it. And especially for having a vision to not race us to the bare bones bottom minimum that we could do, something that was more deserving of, you know, more of what the people of Brentwood deserve. And given the number of people that go through there and use it and our growing community, just thank you.
Thank you. I think part of the reason why we're attracting attention of donors is because they like it. They think it's beautiful, they think that it would be an asset to the town, it would help us for programming, it would just be an attractive, you know, right now, you don't want people coming into town and, you know, going to visit the library, people new to town, and that's what we have, you know. I think it would be more like our town to have a really attractive and workable amphitheater.
Any other board members with questions for these two before we turn it over to Jeff? Okay.
All right, so I'm going to take just a little movement back in this discussion because I know a lot of you have been involved. I see a lot of familiar faces. I'm not sure how many of you have been involved in this process. I'm sure you've been kept up to speed on everything. But I thought it was important to kind of go through and talk about the steps that we went through as part of this process. So again, just for the record, my name is Jeff Highland. I'm a senior landscape architect at Ironwood. I am currently working with Bruce Scammon. I actually met with him yesterday to talk about this project and move this along quickly. We've also been working closely with library trustees and library staff since about, I think, mid-November is when we kind of started kicking our effort off.
And the trustees' names have not been updated, that's one thing.
Yes, sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's good.
We've had a variety of meetings. You can see there was a kickoff meeting in November, a public information meeting in December, conceptual design meeting with trustees, and then a public presentation on the 17th. So it was a pretty quick process, but the outcome of that process, I think, was a pretty good solution for the amphitheater. Looking at where we started, this was the design for the amphitheater and the library expansion back in 2003. This is what it looks like today with the safety fencing. Another shot, you can see the amphitheater, the paved plaza space. You can see that walkway that leads down to the plaza, and the single catch basin in the middle. This is just a few other photographs, just to jog the memory. We went through we prepared a site analysis where we evaluated the existing conditions and looked at opportunities and constraints. This is what we do before we kind of go into the design process. And then we met with, we had this public meeting, the listening session. We talked about what could happen, and it was kind of basically it's the visioning process. It's an opportunity for people to kind of dream and think about what could it be. Today it's this. What do we really want to see 20 years from now or 10 years from now? What are those great opportunities? These are just some of the images that were shared with the group to kind of spur discussion. And these are slides related to material selection and kind of to try to garner some feedback from people as to the direction they'd like us to go from a design standpoint. Kind of what you like and what you don't like. From that point, we kind of entered into a conceptual design process, which is really kind of sketching. It's like looking at the analysis, thinking about all the comments that were received from participants, library trustees, thinking about budget, and all of those kind of, components. From there, we kind of refined it, into a little bit more of a hardline drawing. And then from there, we kind of add the bells and whistles, add some color to make it more visually appealing, make it so that people can understand it a little easier. And from early on, one of the goals was to make or provide products that would allow for fundraising and grant writing. So all of these color renderings were prepared for that opportunity of promotion and marketing to funding sources. And then the next step was going and preparing some kind of illustrations of the design that was prepared. Now again, these are conceptual, they look pretty realistic, but in fact they're really just a vision of what the amphitheater wants to look like. And they're really, they're a great tool for marketing, and I think that's why, there's been so much success at this point. People like to fund things that they can really, get their mind around and understand exactly what the end product is going to look like. And this includes the parking lot expansion and some reworking of the parking lot. And one of the major goals was also to create a really pedestrian safe and friendly environment, so it was easy to move through the site, and in particular, safe to move through the site. You can see right in this illustration, there is a light as well, so we've got site lighting within the parking lot for safety as well. And this is the front entry of the library, so we did look at kind of all entry points, and this being a very important one, we did focus on that as well. And there's, a nighttime shot. And then, from there, we also started developing costs and trying to, determine where we are from a cost standpoint. Now, these cost estimates they're not construction cost estimates. We're not contractors. But, for example, in this month of, actually in the month of May, I think we had four public projects that went out to bid. Tomorrow I've got a pre-bid meeting. So we do this pretty regularly. So one of the things we do is we collect all that data from all the projects that we do put out to bid. So when we prepare cost estimates, we look back and compare to a variety of projects that are kind of similar. It's hard to get exact comparables. So sometimes we have to kind of do our best and use our best judgment when determining a cost. Now, this is done for planning purposes, because one of the things you heard is it's pretty challenging to figure out, you've got a design, now how are you going to implement it? Often it's not uncommon to have funds from a variety of sources. In those different buckets, it's like, how do you kind of shuffle that around to make a project buildable? And that becomes a real challenge. And I would say, design is a big hurdle on any project. You got to come up with a design that people can get behind and people are happy with. And then probably the next most difficult thing is figuring out how to finance it and how to make it fiscally work within your community. And this is just an example of the cost estimate that was prepared. So where we are now is we're kind of starting, and we've had this discussion with the trustees of bidding strategy, because that's kind of the next step. We're teeing the project up for successful public bidding. And we've done the conceptual cost estimate, which gives us kind of a ballpark idea of where we are cost-wise. We know that COVID has created some bidding challenges, and those continue today. It seems like they've gotten a little bit better. We're seeing at least more people bidding on projects, but still there's a lot of uncertainty when bidding. And supply chains have gotten better, but people have a lot of work, and I think because of that, there is a relatively high cost for construction things. So what we've talked about is incorporating some flexibility into the bidding process. So if you enter into a public bidding process, you have to meet certain you have to be fair in your bidding process, right? So if you reach out to three contractors, you have to treat them all equally. You have to provide them all the exact same documentation, and you have to be very upfront and clear to each one. You can't provide one contractor a little bit more information. So because we do this on a regular basis, we understand it. One of the things we do on a lot of our projects is we incorporate deducts or add alternatives or deduct alternatives. In one, you're bidding, so if you're doing a deduct approach, and there's very little difference. I mean, some people might argue there's difference, but if you're doing a deduct approach, what you're doing is you're putting out to bid the complete project, exactly as you want it constructed, every single, down to the last brick paver. And then you identify a variety of deducts. And you're asking the contractor to basically price out individual items that may get pulled from a project. So I guess for a good example, let's say you have 3 benches in your project. Those 3 benches could together be one deduct, or they could individually be one deduct. So you could say, you know, what's the cost of reducing or removing one bench from your project? Might be $1,000, something like that. So at the end of the day, you might have a pretty long, lengthy list of deduct alternatives as part of your bidding strategy. I think I do have an example of somebody, if people are interested, from a recent project where I think there were 35 deducts on it. So it was a pretty lengthy list. And, you know, it was a pretty sizable amount of money, but that's what was necessary because of the uncertainty in the bidding environment.
And Jeff, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
When people are looking to bid a project like this, that they know the funding might be a little bit uncertain, is that a downside? Like, is that a negative to a bidder to have to make that list of deductions, or to know that some of those things might not be getting built, and they may, you know, their final take-home, you know, pay will be lower if we end up deducting things? Is that a negative for us?
Deducts are a little bit of a negative because contractors will usually price them high. And that's their way of, trying to get them so they maybe don't come out. Or if they do come out, you end up paying a little bit more. So you'll pay more.
To do it later.
To pull, yes, you'll pay more to do it later. And that's just kind of the way it is. It's always less expensive to do a bigger project now than to do a smaller project and add things back in.
Gotcha, but it wouldn't turn anybody away from giving us a bid knowing that they had to give us a deduct plan?
It shouldn't. I mean, if you have a huge list of deducts and it's a hassle, there potentially is a little bit of a hassle factor that some contractors just might say, this is too arduous and I'm not going to deal with it. Typically, that doesn't happen, but it can.
So are you preparing that list of adding deduct alternatives?
Yes. That would be
Go out
part of
there.
the bid documents
Okay.
that we prepare. And it's a difficult process because it would be something we'd go through with the trustees and, anybody else, any other town staff who maybe wanted to be involved. Figuring out, because there's also construction sequencing and things like that too. One thing we talked about is the lights, was a potential deduct. Now, you wouldn't want to deduct the light pole footings or the conduit, right? So because then you just have to dig things up when you did that. So your footings and your conduits would be, basically base bid, and then the light poles and the luminaires would be an add alternative, a deduct.
And from my understanding, these guys talked about the parking lot being sort of a big, massive deduct. Would that be completely separate, done by probably a separate bidding process, or would that be part of the sort of master bid that would go out? Would it include the parking lot in the overall plan?
I would include it,
Okay,
yes.
so that would be a deduct.
And
right
it
off the
does
top.
become, that is a bit of a challenge from, again, a construction sequencing and a feasibility, because if you're putting in, curbing, and you've got a new sidewalk, so you're putting in the curbing, but you're not paving, the feasibility and constructability of a project becomes a factor at that point. So what we might be able to do is, you might do base pavement, but not finished pavement, or something like that. Finished pavement might be a deduct, but the base pavement and the curbing might be part of the
Gotcha.
project. The other thing we talked about, and I think Liz alluded to it, was identifying 3, 4, 5 bidders as opposed to doing a broad public advertisement. The challenge with broad one is, you have very little control over that, who's bidding on it, and it takes a lot of work to go and analyze the bids that come back. You might get 10 or 15 bids, having to analyze all of them, and that's pretty costly and arduous to do that. So generally, on a project of this scale, I recommend identifying, qualified bidders in the area and reach out to them directly for a project. So I just basically talked about that. So, maybe before I move on, is there any other questions? Like, people have any questions about, like, the bidding process? It's a work in progress still, because we really haven't identified what that, the duct list might be, and the construction sequencing, and things like that. But, it's still a work in progress. So the next steps, as I said, I did meet with Bruce Scammon yesterday. We thought that it would be valuable to collect a little bit more survey information on site. There appears to be lacking some spot elevations at the thresholds, on the basement doors, and a couple other locations within the site. So he's going to send a crew out to do that. And then from there, we continue to refine, and we've already kind of started this process of refining the layout, making material selections, because at this point, we've kind of got material, we've suggested materials, but we haven't gotten down to the nitty-gritty of picking out a particular manufacturer and a finish on, let's say, the wall block or the unit pavers or things like that. So that is, and that does have a cost implication. So how the specific unit paver that is installed, the difference between cast-in-place concrete versus asphalt, those are still things that we need to go through. And those are also opportunities to save money. And it is part of, as part of this design, we did consider all that. So, we heard very clearly that, fiscal prudence was important from a design standpoint. And, while it might appear like we didn't do that, we tried. And it's hard, but, the selection of a concrete block retaining wall system as opposed to a field stone or a granite block, that's a choice. And, even a concrete retaining wall system with a stone cap on it, we didn't do that, and that's another cost saving. So, it might seem small, and it actually really is relatively small, but, those choices probably add up to $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 at the end of the day. We still need to evaluate the drainage system in a little bit more detail. As part of the cost estimate we prepared, we did anticipate replacing the existing catch basin in the middle of the amphitheater. Bruce was uncertain whether we needed to do that, so that might actually be another cost saving. So he's going to evaluate the status or the condition of that existing catch basin and its need to be replaced. I mentioned the lighting selection and the control systems that will need to be put in place. From some initial discussions with trustees and their discussions with the electrician who's familiar with the library, it sounds like there's plenty of power in the panel, so it sounds like lighting within the site is pretty easy to handle. And then we have to prepare construction details and written specifications all through the bidding process. And then we work with town staff on preparing those bid documents. And those would end up, the bid documents end up becoming part of the contract that you sign with the general contractor. And one thing that, has come up is, how, at this point, we have not met with Planning Board Conservation. There have been some, discussions with Public Works, but generally in a project like this, it's not mandatory that we meet with the Planning Board, but usually we do it as, as a good faith kind of, part of the good faith process. So we're anticipating meeting with the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission, and ideally, I think it would be great if we could actually organize maybe a joint meeting where it's library trustees, planning board, and conservation, so that everybody's there and can kind of hear the same, spiel and provide feedback simultaneously. And then the estimated timeline, we're looking at, we're collecting survey, refining that layout, looking at the drainage system, finalizing lighting selection and material selection. In June, July, we will continue doing that work. We probably also meet with planning board, that may even happen in June, as well as conservation. Complete bid documents in July for an early August bidding process. It's not an ideal time to bid construction projects, but I think if we provide enough time, you know, if you do a short bid period in August, it's not going to go well. So what we're thinking is probably an entire month for contractors. That should give them ample time to pull together a bid on this project with September, October, and November construction. So if, and again, construction projects are inherently a little, you know, you can't guarantee much of anything. I mean, weather can get in the way, but we would hope that, you know, by mid-November, it would be completed, or at least substantially complete, buttoned up for the winter. That's where we stand. It's been an exciting project, and I think, you know, the fact that the community has really come out and supported the project from a financial standpoint is really great. I mean, it shows that this was, you know, really a needed process and element within the community. People appreciate the amphitheater.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
During the construction phase of this, would you shut through traffic off through around the rear of the building to try to minimize the safety concerns of people interfering with?
That is part of that, you know, kind of evaluation of construction sequencing and construction approach. There's a cost associated with shutting things. I mean, there's a cost benefit from a contractor standpoint of shutting things down and sealing off a site. So there is some value in that. You probably see a 10% savings if you were able to completely shut the site down.
I just meant the back, like from the
Yeah,
front
from the
door
front door
down.
yeah, all the way around. Yeah, I think you would see a savings from a bid price if you did that. Because no contractor wants to deal with parked cars and kids running through a
Right.
construction site.
Right.
So that, but it's a challenge, you know, when you have got a library open and trying to stay operational. So I think how that happens, I mean, it might be that different doors have to be used, or, you know, at different periods. Yeah, so that's something we really haven't gotten into those details, but, you know, there are a variety of doors, and I could see that maybe coming into a discussion about.
Andy, do you know of any place they can use overflow parking?
Yep. Brentwood Antiques.
Oh, yeah, you could park there.
My
Probably
second,
limit programming too, like,
Right.
not have much of that going on, so that it's not interfering.
You know what, one thing we hadn't really talked about, but I know that there is a right-of-way further down Dalton Road. So potentially, maybe we look at that. I don't know how vegetated it is, but if you can bring cars in temporarily that way, park in the ball field, and then completely shut down the road, at least when the road, if the road gets torn up and repaved, that would be kind of a key time to maybe really shut it down. But, you know, I think there are a lot of options.
is it possible to go back to slide 7?
Sure. Slide 7. You have to tell me what.
It's an
slide.
overview of the current condition.
Okay.
Right there.
That-
So, my concern is safety and liability to the town. The orange snow fencing does nothing to improve safety and liability. I've seen urban construction zones where they bring in 8-foot or 6-foot high movable metal fence panels, which is definitely gonna keep, because I would assume that the safety concerns is the old wooden bench areas.
Yeah.
Would it be more feasible, because now we've known about this for 4 months, and I'm sure this is what my attorney friend was getting at earlier, was now we're talking another 4 months before we do anything. The town's liability here is great, the fact that all we're doing is putting up some snow fence, which in some of your pictures is laying on the ground anyways. But move to a more stable construction chain link type fence to keep people off of that, especially where you're still using that ramp to access the building. We're just asking for more trouble by not securing that area better. Is that kind of what you're getting at, Paul? That
Well, that was certainly a point, yes. I mean, that was one of the things I was getting at.
Does Wayne have any of that?
I mean, from a liability standpoint, you're absolutely correct. I mean, it's a visual, but it has no safety value whatsoever. So, you can rent chain link fence panels, and, you know, a contractor who is gonna do this, we probably have in the spec that they're required to cordon off the construction area using, you know, chain link fence panelized, you know, system.
I was kind of talking like 3 months ago that should have been, like, not wait till a bid proposal, like this should have been done a long, long time ago. I mean,
Although it has been sitting there like that for 4
Right.
years, right?
I mean, highway could put that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, does Wayne have any of that stuff?
He wouldn't have it, but
But
if
he-
we rented it, they could
They could do it.
most likely install it.
Just adds to the cost.
And then it would
Right.
probably be used throughout the construction too, so, you know, you'd probably rent it for 6 months, something like that.
You
Yeah,
can certainly talk with Wayne about it.
yeah, Wayne's here.
He's chatting, he's chatting about it.
Okay. Is it expensive, do you know?
You know, I don't know offhand what the cost of rental is. We've had contractors who have done it on a number of, most projects have it, but I can't tell you.
We can
offhand.
look in,
I'd have to
I
look.
can find out.
It's not super expensive,
Less than 60,000.
right. Ballpark, I'd say $500 a month.
Yeah.
To encircle this area, maybe.
And just to play devil's advocate, so let's say your big dollar funders don't come through and you have some limited money from your impact fees and your fundraising that you've already done, and you came to us for some amount of ARPA, would the most likely outcome be more of the $60,000 fix? Or do we think if there was a more limited pot of money that we could do a phase 1 build that was better than a grassed out stabilization, but not a full build out? Like, could we do enough deducts if this money doesn't come through,
Chief,
that we could do something like a true stage 1? And then we'd have to do stage 2.
wake up, everyone!
Is that,
My preference, of course, would be to not do the interim piece. The biggest
I
reason
understand that,
is
to
the
do something you
ADA.
have to take out later.
The ADA compliability is gonna be a problem, because it means we have to shut down anything we do in that basement.
so would we just cross that bridge if we end up coming to it in terms of what our plan B would
Well, I
be?
mean, maybe Jeff can plan for that contingency if that, right? Is that something you could look at?
Yeah, I mean, it becomes a little challenging, kind of juggling or
Right.
shifting all of this around. But, you know, I was just kind of looking at what we anticipate the retaining wall system, you know, and it looks like, let's see, where was it? I just had it. You know, the modular concrete block, you know, we're anticipating somewhere around $24,000 for the retaining wall itself. You know, so given that, you could theoretically put the retaining wall block in, not do the paving in the amphitheater, but try to maintain that concrete that comes down. Basically take out the wood, replace it with concrete, reconfigure it.
So there may be like a plan C that's
There might
between
be, yeah.
just stabilize it versus do a build out. Maybe
Right.
there's a middle road if we don't have the funds that but it sounds like you're relatively optimistic that some donors are coming through for you.
I think we're in pretty
But-
good shape.
So we're just kind of gonna wait
But
for
you're
you
right. I
until
mean,
that's,
anything can
until
happen.
it's written on the dotted line, we'll just wait. and see.
Exactly, right.
Okay.
But we're also kind of, you know, we have a design that the community has, you know, embraced. we can't really go back and redesign it,
Yep.
right? So, that almost is, if it borders on kind of redesigning, when they start dealing with, you know, kind of reconfiguring
Like a
things.
minimalist build, yeah.
And
Yeah,
also,
so
in
it's a
this
challenge.
gentleman that wants to give a significant portion is not gonna be happy with the design change. So, you know, if he were to pull out, that's one thing, but if he's still in the process, then that becomes another problem altogether. Because he has a certain, you know, standard that he's looking at. So, not that we have to do it exactly like that, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Money always comes with strings.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. I think this is really helpful to understand kind of the, you know, hopefully what will come to pass over the next couple of months. And you guys feel like you will come back to us when, do you think, with sort of firmed up financial information? I understand the bidding will be out late summer.
My understanding is that this donor is going to the lawyer relatively soon.
Okay.
And we should hear something within the next, I think, week or
Right.
two.
Okay.
And then
And
the grant, then the
$75,000
grant process.
What's the timing of that?
That, I know she was trying to get that out. We've sent in information from our end. She was pulling it together.
So it's supposed to get out this week,
And it was supposed to
so.
get out this week, so I just need to double check with her on that.
Okay.
And I think the people that are,
The foundation.
goodness gracious, the foundation, thank you. I have sinusitis, so that's my excuse. I'm like, my head's full. The foundation, I know they want to move forward as well,
Okay.
so
Mhm.
I can't
So this
imagine
summer,
that's
we
gonna
should
take
get
a long
some more
time.
concrete information for what
Yes.
funds the library
Oh, yeah.
can independently produce for this
Yes.
project.
We're
Yep.
looking imminent, we're
Yep.
definitely
And then
on top of.
That raffle that we're doing is gonna be done during the summer reading program, so we're gonna have a display for the month of July and during the, what do you call it, what's the
So
party?
the kickoff party is June, it's the
20.
last Monday in June. At that point, that's when we're going to make the announcements, start selling the tickets, and at the finale, which is the last week of July, the tickets will be chosen.
Okay.
After
So kind of by the end of the summer,
Yep.
you guys should have a good idea of what your
Yep.
finances are.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from the board before we close this out? Okay, thank you so much. That was
Thank
really
you.
helpful.
Great job.
And thank you for Janice and Liz for explaining all of that to us.
Thank you.
Want to take a quick recess while they pick
Sure,
up?
let's take a quick recess. Everybody needs to take a break. We'll take maybe 5 minutes.
Thank you. That's what I do.
It makes sense to me. If we have enough money to do a commercial build, then just those dollars keep working for you instead of being temporary and remodel it, you just lose that money. There are people with the dollars come through. That'll be good. So that was nice. I was waiting for it. I know that for this, we're gonna have a meeting with both. Is this very like fire? Okay, so this is for general employees, police, fire, because of all the different shifts that are worked. Okay, okay. So it's a joint conversation with everybody. Okay, I gotcha. No,
You want to,
we're going to earn time after.
you want to go
the
ahead
recess.
and expedite things real quick?
We just got seated, sailing, is everybody up?
Yeah. Stretch my legs for 2 seconds. All right, we need Paul and John.
Paul's in here.
Yeah, Paul's right there.
Okay. Let's get him back in here.
Paul, we're about to start again.
Yes, we can close that, we can decide that in closed session.
The other
Okay. I think we should.
What are we doing?
Well, we have June 20th, right?
June 20th
And then the 4th. We just may need to reschedule a July 4th meeting. We can discuss that.
We're gonna have a meeting on July 4th?
No, that would be, it's the first Tuesday of July.
What are the meetings?
I would like not to.
On top?
We're having fireworks at my house, so I would like to not do that. All right, there's John, we got Russ.
Letty, pool done by July 4th, we can have our 4th of July meeting there. So there we go.
All right, we're just waiting for Paul to come back from the restroom, and then we will reconvene.
Are we moving something, or are we?
Karen said that we could potentially decide to bump committee appointments if we wanted. We can discuss that in closed session if we want to bump stuff or not.
Okay.
Oh, we're doing closed, we have non-public?
Oh, we have
Yes,
a
we
lot
have
of-
extensive non-public, but we could bump it, or we could
So
schedule,
sad, like you just kicked his puppy.
or we could schedule a meeting, a non-public meeting next week or something, if we want to do something different.
Cool, that would be ideal.
Yeah, we can discuss that.
Motion. Second? Aye. Done.
can make that face, and
That was
I'm quite mad at you.
command and control right there.
He's taking it by the horns. By the horns. All right, Paul is back. All right, you ready? Russ, you ready? All right. All right, y'all ready?
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna reconvene. Next on our agenda is earned time discussion. This is a follow-up to a discussion that we had, I don't know, 6 or more months ago during budget season, where Chief Byrd had come to firefighters, given that they work 24-hour shifts and not 8-hour shifts, and that created some inequities. And so this is the follow-up conversation. And Karen, maybe you can give some background to what kind of pre-discussions happened to come up with this proposal in front of us.
So the current policy now grants 13 days of earned time for all employees up to 5 years of service. It goes up to 19 between 5 and 10 years of service, and then it increases once you hit 15 years of service. It is the same across all departments, regardless of their schedule now. So this proposal here adjusts it incrementally to adjust for, it's 5% added to account for PD working a 10-hour workday. And then there's another escalator built in for the fire department working to account for their 24-hour shifts. So if a firefighter calls out sick, they're using 24 hours of work at a time.
So from my understanding, is this the base 8-hour workday? We are not increasing earned time. We are just adjusting, we are discussing a proposal to adjust earned time for people who work prolonged shifts. Is that correct, or are we increasing everybody?
Increasing everybody. So there's
Increasing
a small
everybody,
adjustment
okay.
for the 8-hour workday, and then 5% is added for police, and then another escalator for fire.
Okay. And how can we see the level of adjustment on this?
So on column 4
Yep.
is the old hours, so those are the hours as the current policy states.
Oh,
And then
okay.
in column 2, the hours based on the year is what is being proposed.
Gotcha.
So there's a reduction in the hours for that first
Year
year of
one.
service, and then a slight increase going forward based on 1 to 5 years of service.
Okay.
And in the fire department, we've removed the sick pool days, those 5 sick pool days, and rolled them into these accrual hours.
To simplify it?
To simplify, yep. And then to make those hours easier to use. So right now, the sick pool, you have to be out for 3 days in order to tap into them. That 3-day elimination period was removed during COVID. So if you had any COVID-related symptoms or illness, you were allowed to use your sick pool days immediately. So if those are already available to you immediately, you just roll them into your accrual.
I'm sorry, I missed something. You said the first year it goes down slightly and then,
104 to 88, you see that on that first chart?
I leave it the same.
right here,
This is current, this is proposed.
and then.
So you get
This is
slightly
all-
less benefit your first year, but
Oh,
more
this
your
is the
second.
10 hour, okay, yeah. Okay, thank you.
And can I ask the process that was used to come up with this proposal in terms of comparing to other towns, or just sort of for all of our education, kind of how you guys
Go for it.
brainstormed this proposal?
Actually,
And the chiefs can chime in here.
Actually, this is, we actually developed this in Wakefield, so about 3, maybe 4 years ago. So this is the exact model I use in Wakefield, and we based that on several towns in the area that have 24-hour fire department shifts. Several PDs had already gone to 10-hour shifts, so this is based on several models that we kind of put together. And down here is virtually the same as Wakefield was with their 24-hour shifts and 10-hour shifts, so I just applied it.
Gotcha.
And we were a little bit under in terms of what our time was, where I was from, so I just kind of, so basically what you have is the Wakefield model.
Okay. Okay. And so everybody understands, like anyone who has questions in the public, the basic idea behind this was, let's say Karen has strep throat and she has to be out. She takes 1 day off, that's 8 hours. If a firefighter has strep throat and takes 1 day off, they have to take 24 hours off. So that was the sort of difficult inequity we were struggling with, which it doesn't seem fair to make a firefighter take 3 times as many hours off just because they have strep throat. So that's my understanding of it, forgive me if I'm wrong, but like, that's the way I'm conceptualizing it, that we needed to fix that problem.
But
The
they
other
also
part
were,
of that- I'm sorry.
go ahead, chief.
The other part of that is, since COVID, we no longer promote toughing it out and coming in sick with sniffles. So we actually promote wellness, and this actually promotes people to actually take time off when they need it. Which, as you know, makes more productive employees and happier employees at the end.
And not infecting all the rest of their.
And not affecting the rest of us so that we have more people out there.
Sure.
Because, you know, we want people to stay home when they don't feel well. And those that, you know, and I don't see it, you know, it's not a type of a situation where they have people taking advantage of it. If you're sick, you're sick, you should stay home.
What were we gonna add, Andy?
So, yes, they take 24 hours off, but they only work 14 days a month.
Right.
So, I have a hard time with fire getting 3 times the amount of time off that regular employees get. That's, we need to meet somewhere in the middle that everybody kind of gets. Like, 88 hours a year or 92 hours a year is not enough. But you can't
Mine's only
have,
got, if you read mine, mine actually only goes to 106 from the 88.
well, your
Yeah,
one, the paper
me-
I have in front of me, your first year person gets 18 hours a month, whereas a town hall employee gets 7.
Right, because it's based on a 10-hour, it's based on 10 hours a month to get to the 120 to give them the 5 days off for the sick leave. It's based on 10 hours.
Oh, okay, so they're still getting 106.
Right, they're getting 106 as the regular vacay, and then you're adding the 5 days of sick leave on top of that. So that, in order to spread that out, you're spreading it out over a 10-hour a month to accumulate it, type of thing.
But
So
we're
they're
not,
get-
we need to give that same benefit to every employee if we're gonna give it to fire, is what I'm saying. If we're gonna give fire back their 5 sick days, then we need to give that to everybody.
Were all employees previously eligible to use that sick pool?
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, that would make sense that it should be equaled out.
The problem is 80, the idea behind the earn time was to be able to take a day off without being sick. Like, it's your time, use it.
Right, you have a doctor's
Befo-
appointment or something.
Before we enabled it, you had sick time and vacation time.
Yep.
And, you know, there was always a question of, is somebody really legitimately sick when they call out sick? So we're like, let's just roll it all into earn time.
Yep.
And then people can take a day off because they want to take a day off.
Yep.
Well, at the same time, you gotta look at it this way. If you take 3 hours and go to the doctor's and take it out of your earn time, it doesn't affect a shift. If my guy takes 3 hours, I've gotta figure out a way to cover it. So technically, he really just gotta take the 12 in order to take a doctor's appointment for 2 or 3 hours in the day. I can't just have somebody come in and cover that.
But you
So
can-
I've literally gotta come up with somebody to cover that 12.
He can schedule it the other 3 days a week. He's
You
not
can,
working.
but I'm just saying, if a family emergency comes up or something to that effect.
I'm just saying there has to be a balance between the town hall or police employee and the fire employee, because all you're doing is gonna drive a wedge in between.
I'm not trying to do that.
No, I understand what, and
And I'm not, I'm
your
seriously-
numbers aren't that off. I mean, as the county pays 18, 22, 24 a month. So your first year county employee gets 18 hours a month. After 5 years, you get 22.45, and then after, I think it's 10 years, you get 24 hours a month. So I mean, his numbers aren't that far off, but to have it that much different than everybody else. That was the original discussion of this plan, was like the town employees everywhere it's low as far as the benefit.
So I guess I'm a little confused, like on this first page that lists town employees and then police. I can understand how that makes sense, that a day off for police is just slightly longer than a day off for town. How do these numbers, like, if we were to make this chart for fire, what numbers am I looking at? Like that would compare to the 104, 156, 208,
This 106.
the 106,
Here you go.
the 153.
Is that what you're looking for? Because we'll do it this way.
Just like,
'Cause I-
'cause we have the other two departments
There you
listed
go,
like this.
try this one,
Okay,
try this one here,
just so we
Karen,
can
can you run
compare
that off?
apples to apples.
It doesn't include the 10 for the sick, so you would add the 10 in for the sick. That give you a better idea how it works?
So that actually looks identical to
It is pretty
police.
close, it is pretty close.
Oh,
But
it's
then he adds
identical.
in the sick.
Then you add the sick to it.
Oh, okay, so
So
this
there's
is
five,
free.
5 more days for, there's another 40 hours
Add the 40
a
hours
year.
into these,
Yeah,
Gotcha.
you gotta add,
if you're gonna roll in a zip pool.
I guess what I need to understand is sort of what problem we're trying to fix here, and is this the right way to fix it? Right, that's what I'm trying to understand.
I need to see regular employees, police, and fire in a spreadsheet. Like this, I can't, this does not compute for me.
Can I make a photocopy? Joe, can I keep?
Oh,
that?
wait, no, I'm looking at the old hours.
you want that? Sure,
So the old hours for police and fire were the same. The new hours,
right.
police maxes out at 239, fire at 273. So that's that difference you were talking about.
Yes. You gotta-
And that's because
Yeah,
the
you
5
gotta,
sick
you gotta
days
read
are
it
rolled
back
in
the
here.
same way you read the other ones.
We can find the equivalency really.
Yeah.
Pretty
Yeah.
easily if we just
Put it in a
apples to
spreadsheet.
I'll
apples.
put it in that spreadsheet for you.
Katarina put that together for me today, because I sat and struggled with the
Yeah.
other one.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm struggling to understand is like with my example of like, okay, if you're sick and you have to take 24 hours off, does this proposal fix that problem or not? Like, what's your thought, Andy, about like, we wanted it to feel like, oh, if you're sick, you take a standard shift off, right? And it's not your fault that you happen to work 24 instead of 8. Do you feel like this helps solve that problem, or is this just solving a different problem?
I think we need to add hours to every employee, which should help solve the fire problem.
Okay. Because you think that the sick days should just be rolled into earned time,
So-
which makes sense.
But come at me with some proposal for that, because I'm curious as to your thought process to that. And I'm just asking, I'm not trying to shortchange anybody by any means. Everybody here that is an employee deserves a fair shake, and it's a great group. Please don't let me, I'm just trying to figure out what you're trying to accomplish with it, Andy, is all I'm trying to do.
Just equality.
I understand that, but, and how we,
My feelings is that 128 hours is low for time off for an employee.
okay, all right,
That,
okay.
that was my original
And
complaint,
fires.
and then you just compounded on it with the
And
24-hour
fires.
shifts.
I got
Fires at
you.
150.
I'm following you. Okay. I'm on the same page with you. I'm
But
not, like I said.
let's say we bump everybody to roll that sick pay just into earned time. That's how my company does it. If it's a holiday, if I'm on vacation, if I'm sick, if I'm doing a conference, it's all earned time. None of it's different, right? And I think it's a very clean way to do it. But I think what I'm not understanding is if we bump everybody up, have we fixed what feels like an inequality for a 24-hour worker? Or are we still gonna be left feeling like there's an issue there? That's what I'm confused about.
So that's why I wanted to see what does it look like for an average town employee in terms of them taking the shift off, in terms of how much leave they have, in terms of how much, what's their hour, how many hours they work over the course of a year. You can literally, and I have all of the comparisons right there in front of me, so that we'll be able to just visualize where the inequities are and what adjustments have to be made across the board, and then what other customized adjustments have to be made to it.
I think the inequality, so if you take a week off, 40 is 40, right? So 40 for police, 40 for town hall is the same, 42 for fire. That's not, but it's the one-off days, that's where the inequities are felt, right? If a firefighter just takes one day off versus 1 day off.
They have to take 24 hours off.
That's where.
But how many hours do they work in a month?
Um,
Because what.
the ratio should kind of be the same,
The
right?
ratio is what
Right.
I'm looking to achieve.
A firefighter takes 1 day off, you could have 4 days off with that 1 day.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so
So
I
it's
think
basically a
that's what I
vacation.
needed to wrap my mind around. It's really the ratio that needs to be fair,
Correct.
right? If I take a Friday off and it's a fifth of my week, and a firefighter takes a day off and it's a fifth of his week, the hours sort of don't matter as much. It's just that the ratio has to be equitable across departments. Okay, so maybe that's what really
Well,
needs
there again, mine's based on a rotation, so these guys are they're working all but the 8th week of a rotation, 48 hours on a week. Then you take the 8th week, and they're only working a day in that 8th week to make up the difference. Hence the reason they get paid out at 42 hours, not the overtime. So it spreads out over an average of the 8 weeks.
Are you doing 24 on, 24 off?
24 on, 24 off, 24 on.
48 off.
Right.
Okay, so two things that I'm hearing here. One is that if we're rolling 5-day sick into earned time, it has to be done across the board, which makes sense to me, because if previously it was across the board, it still needs to be across the board.
Yeah.
So all of those would be adjusted. And then if we can get some sort of a spreadsheet that breaks out the ratio of what it looks like when somebody from town offices versus police versus fire takes a single day off, like what percentage of their earned time are they spending down to do that, and are those percentages relatively equivalent? I think that's to your point, right? When you only work 2 days a week, it's a different than if you work 5 days a week, but the ratio needs to be equitable so that you're not being penalized an additional portion of your leave for taking a single day off.
Do we have anybody left working an 8-hour day?
Tamara does mostly. Kip does. Heather does. So yes.
Okay, we do have.
I thought the majority of people were on the 4 and 3.
It depends because, so in town hall, it depends because it depends on their meeting schedules. Whether they have one meeting that week or 3.
I guess I'm confused about the numbers.
Yeah, I think we all are. We just need to see it in a different.
Spreadsheets, trust me.
No, I
Solve
I
all
get
the problems.
I'm back to being confused again, you know, and it's just getting old, but, you know, 18.3 hours, you know, and you multiply that by 12, and now you're at 220 hours for someone who's employed for 0 to 1 year, and I don't know, in my simple mind, I'm thinking that's like, almost 5.5 weeks of,
It's listed as 106 here.
When you roll in the sick leave,
Oh,
it's
the
to be
sick.
220.
220, okay.
Letty's already got a spreadsheet designed and
No.
done. and-
I just had a question because I want to make sure I'm understanding this
because that just seems like a lot to me. But that's just, you know, don't mean to be offensive there.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Just-
I just wanted to see if I didn't miss, or if the number in this document is different. Going from 8 to 10 is 25% different, not 5%?
Yeah, I don't know how that 5% was chosen.
I didn't know if this was
We're going with spreadsheet.
If I
Thank
may,
you.
That's why we need
Can I-
spreadsheets.
can I
Yeah, we'll regroup and come back.
Table.
can I suggest one thing? Spreadsheet.
Well, and I
I'm
think,
hearing
It's an
you.
amazing suggestion. Glad you made it.
I think what I'm hearing from the board, though.
We're gonna get, John, I'm gonna get you a spreadsheet.
We need Gabby Kelly. We need Gabby Kelly, or we need like Alina or Rita.
That's easy.
I think what I'm hearing in general from the board, though, is we want it to be fair across departments. We want to get rid of this arbitrary earned time is different from sick, right? Just simplify everything. So I think we're probably on the same page about that. Now we just got to get to the nitty gritty. Does that sound correct to everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Love it.
Love it. Okay,
Move the table.
Shall
so
shall it?
we are
Shall I
moving
throw the other?
forward.
Nope. Okay.
We're gonna put a pin in that, Joe.
Think
Huh?
about it.
All right, we're gonna figure this out, Joe. Don't give up. We need a spreadsheet. Okay.
Question
Still
from the
gotta know
back seat.
at some point.
I don't know if you wanted to take it or not.
No, we're not gonna take questions right now. Are we done with this discussion? Are everybody happy to close it out?
Move the table.
Okay. We'll table this.
Just a couple of quick updates for you guys, because I haven't been in. Portables are in, we'll be distributing them next week. The radios are in, he is waiting for the charges for the trucks for the portables, so he can do his installation all at once. My ambulance got pushed off, it's coming probably the middle of July, which means it'll be sometime in August before we actually get it in service. But that's the projected time at this point, so, just to give you an idea what's going on. I would like to thank the voters for their support for the radios. It was greatly appreciated. It'll get rid of some antiques that are falling apart as we speak, so,
Great, thanks for the update.
yep.
Thanks, Chief.
You're welcome.
All right. Next is discussion of impact fees for the school to cover a safety and security construction project that took place over there.
Before the chief leaves, did you just want to read that into the record?
Oh, yes. Chief,
Before you leave,
before
Chief.
you step out, we did receive a communication from Jack Bryan,
Yes.
choosing to resign his position,
Yes.
but looks like stay on as per diem.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any further comment you have about that?
Fantastic guy. I wish him the best of luck. It was some issues that he's had that it made him move. I'd take him back in a heartbeat. It's just the way things are. I hate to say it, but you're running a revolving door here anyway on the fire side of it. You can go anywhere in the state right now and pretty much pick and choose unless you're a total dum-dum, and you can almost pick the departments you want to be on. It's making it tougher to get per diems at this point. One of my very trustworthy ones, and Karen knows the one I'm talking about, has just been promoted to lieutenant over in Bedford and has a young one. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that I'm gonna get him back. He was actually doing a rotating shift for me. And he's been out the last 4 weeks playing Mr. Dad, so.
Okay.
That's where we stand at the moment, and you know, we got a couple of things coming up later.
So this was a full-time employee?
This
that
was
we're
a
now
full-time
down.
employee that moved on down to
Yep.
the southern end of the state here, where he was an original call firefighter to begin with, and like I said, due to circumstances, it works out better for him that way.
Okay. All right, do we need to take a vote to accept the resignation? I'll take a motion to accept Jack Ryan's resignation on good terms, it sounds like.
Moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Thank you. Sure, do we have the letter for that? Is it in the mail too? I think we have another one.
I didn't see it on the
Maybe it wasn't an email. Maybe Karen, you can read it out. We do have another resignation. Yeah, I'm not sure it was in the, it was printed. I'm not sure. We can just read it into the record once we find it. Here, I have one. Is this it?
Yes.
Okay. So, this is an email that was sent to Chief Ventura from Jeremy Worcester, who after much thought and consideration is moving forward to put in his notice. And very thankful for all the learning experiences and memories I've gotten here since starting in 2017. No negative reasons I'm leaving, I just need to focus on my family and myself moving forward. Chief, I don't know if you have any comments on that personnel change?
No, Jared was a great employee here. He just, like he said, he has to focus on family and his full-time job. He works at the shipyard. And he works part-time for 2 departments. He's gonna stay on just for 1 shift a week in Kingston, and that's pretty much it.
All right. take a motion to accept Jeremy's resignation.
Moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Moving on for impact fees for the school. So the school needed to do a safety and security project that was not budgeted or appropriated for in their budget for last year. It was an unanticipated project. The initial plan had been to use impact fees from the school and potentially police and/or fire to help fund this. The process got dragged out a little bit by some technicalities of how we needed to make that happen on the legal side. But the school did get to the point where they could use $55,202.11 of school impact fees for this, and they have voted to do so. So my understanding is we would need to vote to release that money and send it directly.
The school has already received it.
They've already received that, okay. So the second part was a potential additional $10,000 that was gonna come out of police fire impact fees to help support that program. There was some discussion at town offices of whether that portion of 10,000 should maybe be tabled until the school budget comes to a close. Because if we allocate that to the school and the school ends up having a budget surplus, that money will just go directly back to the voters rather than being reserved for police improvements, which is what its intended purpose is. So there was some discussion about whether we should stick a pin in that. I was at the school board meeting last night, and the infusion of the $55,000 to their appropriations helps them cover that. And right now, they are looking to finish out the school year in a decent position, not negative, which they can't, obviously. But I think there's still, a couple weeks left in the school budget, right? So we are kind of, there was some discussion about whether we should put a pin in that versus voting to dispense it tonight.
I thought we already dispensed it.
We have not dispensed it.
I think
Didn't we vote to dispense it though?
No, you discussed whether or not you would use those funds or not. You didn't vote.
I think the chief had an offline conversation with the school board about doing
A
that.
couple of members of the school board, yes. Not public.
So I think it could go either way. I mean, I think if
We kind
they,
of already agreed to do this, and it's $10,000 going back to the vote. It doesn't, I don't think it's a bad thing to send $10,000 back to the voters. It's not make or break money on any
Right.
project that we have, and we've already agreed to do it, so I don't see why we wouldn't just get this done and follow through with our agreement.
other thoughts on that?
The 10,000, if we didn't, if it wasn't needed, it would go back, it would stay.
In the impact fund for police, or police fire, right?
The discussion was to take it out of the police line. There is not enough in the fire.
It would stay in there where it can stay for up to 6 years and be expended on a police improvement.
Right.
Which would be helpful, don't get
Sure.
me wrong, I'm
Yeah.
not saying that.
Sure,
I guess that's where I'm at, is just, I don't know, if we can wait, then, and they're not adversely affected the school.
I mean, how are we gonna know that? We're not even really gonna meet again before the end of the school year.
Well, their budget would close at the end of June, and then your next scheduled meeting after that would be the first week of July. So we could quickly cut that check and turn it around if they were in need of that funds.
I mean, can we just say that, can we make a vote that if they do need those funds between now and the end of the school year, that we can just cut the check? Can we just make that motion? Is that?
So my question is, has the vendor been paid for the services? Like, when was this completed?
yes, I believe so.
I don't know if they've been paid or not.
Well, yep. When was it completed?
I want to say, where are we at? I want to say,
A couple months ago?
about a month ago.
I thought it was longer than that, but I mean, the vendor
Betty,
needs,
can you speak to that? Has the vendor been paid?
I know that there was a discussion at the meeting last night that we were gonna pay the vendor directly, but I
Right.
don't know if we've already paid for the entire,
Okay,
because a lot of that is just unpaid. Like, there might be a purchase order for the full amount,
Right.
but I don't know if that's been sent, I can find out.
I would be okay going either way. I mean, if they need it to keep their budget intact, obviously, we should give it. I think this would exhaust the police impact fees, correct?
They would have a small buffer left,
But it would use the bulk of what's left in their
Yes.
fund. So
it's more than that.
I would be in favor of potentially leaving it in there if the school really doesn't need it to hit their budget. But that, as there was a discussion last night, there's unanticipated costs, and there was just a big unanticipated autism services cost. And so their budget is still kind of an open question at this point with a couple weeks of school left. So however this board feels
Can I-
comfortable handling it.
Is anyone opposed to me making the motion that if they require the $10,000 or some portion thereof to stay solvent for the school year, that they will cut the check between now and the next meeting?
I would not be opposed to that.
I think that sounds reasonable.
I'll make that motion.
I thought the idea though was whether or not to table it, or I thought if,
Well, that's why I'm making the motion the way that I'm making it. I'm not saying to just cut the check, I'm saying if they needed to stay solvent for the school year, then we've made the agreement, like they need the money, let's cut them the check. And if they don't, then, if they don't need it to stay solvent, then
Right. This was an equivalent conversation that took place at the school board last night about they had this unanticipated special education expense. And there was a discussion, should they withdraw from their special education trust fund to cover that? And the discussion was, let's not do that. Let's wait and see how the budget closes out in a few weeks. Because if we don't draw that out of the trust fund and don't spend it, it goes back to the voters. Not that that's a bad thing to ever give money back to the voters, but it's in that capital reserve fund for a reason.
goes back
and
to the
that
voters
reason.
and how.
Because any money that's left over at the school
Yeah.
at the end of the year goes back to the voters.
there's no reserve.
You use it to offset taxes for the
Right.
next year.
Right. So some years it's 300,000, some years it's 10,000, right? It just depends on what unanticipated costs that they had relative to their budget. And so that was a discussion last night, which I thought was wise, that their chair said, we don't want to draw down on a capital reserve fund that has a specific purpose for special education and end up just directly giving that back to the voters, because then next year when we have these special education costs, that money is gone. So it was kind of like, let's wait and see when the rubber hits the road, when the budget closes. Right now, their budget is fairly close, and they have some open purchase orders, but I think it's close in the positive, if I'm understanding right now. Projected, fingers crossed numbers.
So I just want to make a clarification.
Please.
Clarify, the school is not insolvent currently.
Right,
The way that it works is we can't use our income to offset our appropriations. So any income that we make from anything doesn't change how much we spend, if that makes sense. The only way that we were able to change the appropriations was by having a public hearing kind of
Correct.
did it. So we have $90,000 in income. We're not gonna be negative at the end of the year. We're not in the red or anything. We just can't use that to offset these expenses that we're budgeted for.
because your spending is capped by the voters.
Yes.
Yes.
By RSA, by,
So where do your expenses sit as far as your appropriation?
like, actually the number.
Well, so do you need the $10,000 to pay from this account to pay for that project?
Currently, based on the estimates we have through the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th, no. But
Maybe.
Dr. Jones gave a perfect example. When we got our packet last night, they were like, oh, here's $20,000 of a new ABA position that we didn't know we were gonna need. We have to provide those services if they're identified for students in our school system. It's not like putting
Optional,
off
yeah.
the amphitheater. Like, legally, we have to provide those things.
Of course.
So that could happen at any time. I was surprised by how high that number was for 6 weeks for the rest of the year. We had also talked at the school board meeting last night about being able to call a special meeting in the situation that Dr. Jones was talking about, where something else comes up that we're not expecting. We can call a special meeting and pull money out of our piece. So I appreciate the offer. It is truly up to you.
I think that's
So-
why your motion makes sense. If they need it to hit their bottom line budget, we will pay up to $10,000. If they don't need it, we will leave it for police to use
So that we
in the
can
future.
buffer from a
Correct.
$50,000 radio request.
Correct.
in the future, yeah.
Yep.
Not that you would do that.
Do you feel that that's a feasible,
It's coming.
actionable motion? That it makes sense? Okay.
Motion on the table then?
Okay, yep, we have a motion
Second.
on the table and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
I,
And I'm an aye, so that is a pass. Okay. All right, closing out the public meeting with our committee updates, we will go around the table and start with Andy.
I have
Okay, John?
None for now.
Okay, Russ?
Well, we got the Energy Committee update already from Chairman. Communications Committee, I believe was planning to meet Thursday, but that's going to be delayed. So I think that's it.
Paul, any updates or board matters?
I went to the Rockingham County Planning Board yesterday for the regional impact on the gas station
Yes.
restaurant that's on the 107, 125. So the upshot is that two recommendations, because it's in the aquifer zone, one that they're going to recommend a hydrogeologic study, which makes sense. Also put Exeter on notice because of it being in the Exeter watershed and the tributary heading towards the river. The other is the traffic impacts, and the recommendation was going to be contingent upon upgrades to that section of the road at 125 and 107, and also putting a light at that intersection, which I think fits in nicely with the whole notion of a light further up north on South Road. So I thought that was something that I could support as the Brentwood representative at the meeting.
So is it like a done deal that if this project goes forward, there would be a light? Was that kind of how it was presented?
That would be a non-advisory recommendation
Gotcha.
by the Rockingham County, but
County.
it's ultimately up to the town of Kingston.
Gotcha.
But I think that has some weight, and where Brentwood isn't a butter, I'll make that position known. I'm assuming that's something people would want.
Sure. Anything from planning board?
Other than a bakery potentially ending up at Dr. Mitchell's old property on South Road and 125. Those just sort of in the works as a possibility.
Where the veterinary?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I did have a taste. I did have a taste afterwards, and the cupcakes were quite good.
Yeah, what?
So-
Oh my God, they are awesome.
Yeah, it's the one in Kingston.
Fresh AF is really good.
Interesting.
expanding or
Moving, potentially.
Exactly what we.
Oh, kind of cool.
Put a Dairy Queen in there, too.
All right.
Me too.
Yeah, that's right. We don't really have a lot of ice cream. Yeah,
The red velvet cupcake with the filling was quite good.
okay.
Yeah.
Paul Kleinman stamp of
Yeah,
approval.
lots of calories.
Okay, all right. Moving on, as I mentioned, I was at the school board meeting last night. One of the things that occurred last night is Daphne Wass and Dick Chamberlain came with me to address the school board about the election issue. As we had previously talked about last month at this meeting, our decision was to go back to the school board with some additional information and ask the school board to reconsider allowing us to have all elections at the school rather than trying to have them at the rec. The specific ask that we have for them, because many of the elections, the school is already closed, like the general election and the town election, is to add 3 additional days off in the next 4 school years. And those are for a presidential primary and 2 state primaries, which tend to be fairly high voter turnout events. So we talked to the school board, and I think there was some differences of opinion from different school board members. The feeling I got from the group is that there was some general flexibility with the idea of doing this. I think the main stumbling point was the next date that we need from them, which is February of 2024, is not yet set because of the first in the nation fights that are going on, and it is unclear what day the New Hampshire presidential primaries are going to occur on, and if they are going to be on the same day, or if there's going to be a Republican primary and a Democratic primary on different days. And I think that made the board feel like there was nothing actionable they could vote on to add that particular day. So that is, we agreed kind of mutually to table that discussion. The Secretary of State has advised Daphne that by this fall, we should know that date ideally, and the school board has agreed to have us come back when we know the date and renegotiate with them. They also agreed to try to do some data gathering from other towns locally of how they manage elections at school when they have to close the school, and how they make that work for the community. So I thought overall it was a good conversation. There was nothing definitively decided, but we sort of agreed to table it and rediscuss potentially in the fall. So I think we will hopefully move forward on that issue. That was the major update from that. And I think that's all I have for updates. Any other board member issues to come before the board? Nope, okay.
Just one thing,
yeah,
I know it's.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I had this idea that I thought could be helpful to bridge the divide that exists at times. And I was up in Vermont a couple of weeks ago, a couple of weekends ago, and speaking with one of the groups at the farmers market, and they had invited me to their town get-together because they were holding a whole town fair, and where they would be presenting a town citizen of the year. I just thought that that might be a fun and nice thing, for us to consider, and we could take nominations of who that might be, and maybe present a citizen of the year. Just a thought.
That's interesting. I know Exeter does something along those lines through the Chamber of Commerce, I believe.
Yeah.
Citizen of the Year / Grand Marshal of the 4th of July parade.
Oh, now
There you
you're
go.
thinking.
There you
Yeah.
go. So, I don't know,
Okay.
just food for thought.
Something to think over.
When you said you were in Vermont, I was worried you're gonna talk about passing around a peace pipe. It's not legal here yet.
New Hampshire.
I think he might have.
All right, we'll stick a pin. Russ is done. Look at him over there. It's like, I'm done. It's like, it's 8:22, I'm done.
I'm still confused.
We do need to go into closed session to discuss hiring and maybe a quick legal update. We were going to do some discussion of committee appointments, but I think we can discuss after we go into closed session, potentially bumping that or doing a special closed session only meeting maybe next week to discuss that, because it is getting late and I think we've had a lot on our agenda tonight after not meeting for 3 weeks. But I will take a motion to go into closed session for legal and hiring.
Moves.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I'm an aye. So we will now go into closed session. Thank you everyone for being here.